So one of my favorite games, it's just a feel-good junk food game, is Uncharted 4. And that's not going to surprise anybody. It's like a game that has pirates, which I'm all in for. It's graphically stunning even to this day. Gameplay's pretty solid. The writing's really good. It's just overall a really solid game. I really enjoy it. It's crazy to think that this is a 2016 game, by the way. This is a 2016 game you're looking at. If this trailer dropped today, people would be like, wow, it's one of the best looking games of the year. It's wild how ahead of the curve they were. But anyway, with Uncharted 4, there's been all sorts of stories over the years about its development process. And it's an important game in the history of Naughty Dog, of course, because it is the point where there was a fork in the road and where Naughty Dog could basically go the way that they had been going with like Amy Hennig's direction for Uncharted and for the studio in general, or they could double down on Neil Druckmann and Bruce Straley's vision, which was this potential for more gritty, grounded cinematic storytelling as opposed to, well, maybe cinematic. Uncharted 3 was cinematic. Maybe a better way of saying it is like less campy, you know, less blockbuster, you know, Michael Bay, you know, it more putting effort into characters and writing and letting that be at the forefront. And the reason I say there's been stories over the years going every which way is because it's been a point of dispute. It seems as though there's a different story depending on who you talk to. If you talk to some people from outside Naughty Dog, they will say that it was basically the success of The Last of Us that pushed Neil Druckmann and Bruce Straley into the position where Naughty Dog loved their work and was like, you guys are going to take over Uncharted 4. It's kind of iffy right now. We're going to get rid of Amy and you guys just make it like The Last of Us. And it's basically framed by some people as The Last of Us was such a big hit for them, so much critical acclaim that they just decided to double down on that. The guys responsible for that, double down on that. More misery? Yeah, make it sadder. Make it more miserable and sad. Make me cry more. And then the other side of it is what we're gonna mention today, which is a problem that is even more broad, which was that Uncharted 4 was, according to some people with direct knowledge, it was in a rough spot, a really rough spot, and that Neil and Bruce were brought in to basically save it. Now, the reason that this is like somewhat controversial as a discussion is because there's a lot of people out there, especially after The Last of Us Part 2, that have like a vendetta against Naughty Dog, a vendetta against Neil Druckmann. And especially after Uncharted 4, Bruce Straley left. He started his own company. They have a game coming out. They announced it late last year, I believe, at the Game Awards. I'm blanking on the name, but it's the one with like the big monster dude and the old lady that goes and explores maps with him. It looks really cute. But when Bruce left, there was all sorts of debate and discussion over why he left, and people were worried that now, it's everything that Naughty Dog does now is just going to be like The Last of Us Part 2. It's going to be really miserable. It's going to be tragedy porn. You know, it's just going to be how sad and depressed can we make you? And that's the video game, right? I'm not too interested in the debate over whether you like that style or not. What I'm interested in is what was going on with Uncharted 4. That's what we're talking about here. And that's where this gets really, really interesting. So after The Last of Us in 2013, they do a DLC, the Left Behind DLC, and then times move forward and it's clear that they need help with Uncharted 4. This is where this reporting that originally came from Kiwi Talks originates from. So there is an article written by Andrew Heighton on this interview with Kiwi Talks. Again, I've pointed you guys to go watch Kiwi Talks. Just Kiwi Talks on YouTube. Does a bunch of interviews with game devs. Does a great job. You can see Kiwi Talks right here. Fantastic channel. You should absolutely be following him. This just does a good job of transcripting it, which makes it a little easier for us to go through it. Now, this particular thing, as you can see, leading up to Uncharted 4, Naughty Dog had comfortably cemented the franchise as one of PlayStation's marquee IPs. Uncharted 4 was a series debut on the PS4, and it ended up being a technical marvel. According to a former Naughty Dog dev, this was far from the case at first. Uncharted 4 implied to have sucked and had to be remade, is what he says. Now, the reason that this is interesting is because, again, there's some people who would frame this as Neil and Bruce stole Uncharted away from Amy, and that Amy's version was going to be good, but they basically stole it away from her because they wanted to take over the studio and they pushed her out the door. That's what some people have been running with for the last few years, is this dynamic where they believe that Neil stole Naughty Dog away from Amy and those people that were working on the original version of Uncharted 4. This would suggest that it was much more of a, they needed to save the game. Okay, what is this specifically? Well, Gabriel Batencourt, which is a fantastic name, has worked for Monarch Games Incorporated for the last 7 years, primarily focused on technical lighting, game design, and app development. But if we turn back the clock, he worked at Naughty Dog from between July 2012 and February of 2019. His work includes The Last of Us Part 2, Uncharted Lost Legacy, Last of Us Left Behind DLC, and crucially, Uncharted 4. That is a pretty solid resume, if I'm being real. Pretty solid resume. In an interview with Kiwi Talks, Batencourt opened up on, we believe, Uncharted 4's early days of development. Quote, I remember this one game prototype. I won't say which one, but there was a project that had been in production for 2.5 years, almost 3, and corporate had said, we're having questions about this. The franchise was successful up until that point. There was no reason to question that this thing would be successful. But at that time, the leader was surrounded by people who were always saying yes, and they were living in the glory of their success going into or onto their 4th project. I mean, this is Uncharted. We're talking about Naughty Dog, and he was there from 2012 to 2019. He's talking about a game that was the 4th entry in the franchise, 4th main entry that they had worked on. It's Uncharted. Okay, so anybody who's like, oh, so it might not be because he's not saying what the project is, it's Uncharted 4. Okay. And now they're delivering this deadline for a demo. And I think they just took it for granted. We've already had success before. We're going to have it again. We've done this 3 or 4 times already. So we're just going to be this great thing. So we're going to just be this great thing. One of the directors from another team was asked to weigh in, and I wasn't there. I only heard the story, and that director walked in the room full of all these people. He picked up the controller and said to everyone, this game sucks. The suggestion is, if this is another one of the directors from another team, Naughty Dog only had 2 teams, as far as we know, in that era. So the Last of Us team and Uncharted's team. And so one of the directors from the other team, that means it had to have been Neil or Bruce. Bruce, of course, was the gameplay director of The Last of Us and Uncharted 4, whereas Neil was like the writer and creative director. So it could be Bruce, it could be Neil, either which way. I'm guessing if they wanted the game, specifically the game test, it might have been Bruce, but we'll see. Batencourt explained that this left the entire room in shock. The project's director, who would have been Amy Hennig, was angry, and when somebody working on the game outed the comments as rude, the other director responded, quote, no, but the game sucks. There's no objectives. It's hard to follow what's going on. The controls are clunky. This isn't like you guys. This isn't what we delivered in the past. In the meeting, people walked out of there really upset. This director, I'm surprised, he had the gall to say something like that. Things didn't stop there, though. Batencourt revealed that higher-ups looked at the project, and at first, they were continuing the game's development and would ignore the naysayer. Where have we heard that before? I'm not sure this is a good idea. Should we really have, in Suicide Squad, should we really have one of the characters pee on the Flash? That seems kind of distasteful. Shut up. Shut up. Shut up. Be positive. be positive. Shut up. Hey, in this game we're working on Forspoken, the cuff and the girl talking to it constantly, it's like really annoying and cringy. Can we cut some of the dialogue? Shut up. Shut up. This is awesome. You like it. Shut up. This attitude doesn't tend to work out well, because usually, sometimes, let me be clear, sometimes there are haters. But when you're talking about developers in the studio who are all trying to make a game that's successful or make a thing that's successful and that their audience will like, that kind of pushback and critical feedback is important. Like, you should never want an environment and a culture of constant, nonstop positivity and upbeat, like, encouragement 24/7, because that's not how you flush out bad ideas. Because maybe this is controversial to say, I'm a firm believer that there are usually just as many bad ideas as there are good ideas. And it's important to be able to flush out the bad ones and keep the good ones. But if you just mix all of them together, that's how you get hodgepodge messes that maybe have strong elements. Forspoken is a great example of a game that had a lot of really good elements. The combat system, graphically for the time, the particle effects, all that stuff was really, really well done, but the writing sucked ass. And as a result, the whole project was pulled down. Even though they had good ideas, because they didn't get rid of enough bad ones, the whole thing was pulled down. You know? Same, yeah, Veilguard's another example. It had a lot of really solid things. Like, I thought gameplay-wise, it was solid enough. It was optimized out the ass. It ran really well. Graphically, it was really impressive. There were a lot of really good things about Veilguard. But one of the important things, probably one of the most important things for a Dragon Age game, is the writing, and especially with the companions. And that was really bad. We know our fans really want steamy romances. So let's have them drink a cappuccino and chill in a closet and then fade to black. And that's it. After 10 hours of gameplay, that's what you get. That's your steamy romance. What are we doing? What are we doing? Okay, so things didn't stop there. Okay, ignore the naysayer. But then he added that corporate took things further. And again, you remember the dynamic. Uncharted is coming off of Uncharted 3, Uncharted 2. Like, these are fantastically successful games that people knew and loved. But it's not in a vacuum. Uncharted 4 is being made in the shadow of The Last of Us. And the shadow of The Last of Us, I'm sure, was one of the most imposing and haunting things for a team ever. It came out of nowhere. Original IP is lauded as one of the best games ever made. It wins countless Game of the Year awards. It's like a masterpiece across the board. Really set into motion a new era for cinematic storytelling in gaming. Like, it really was a fantastically successful thing for them. And it's something Sony loved through and through. Sony loved having a new project that was like a critical darling. And one of those directors responsible for that tremendously successful thing is saying that your project sucks. And I'm sure that was communicated at some point to corporate as well. And corporate's going to be like, they just nailed it. They just knocked it out of the park. And they think this is bad. So do you think they're lying? You know, what is the suggestion here? You guys are in trouble, he said. We're going to pull funding from this if you guys don't fix this. As a result, the director of that project was pulled away. That would have been Amy. Even though they they had been successful, and the naysayer, along with the two others, were put in to help fix it. And then the game had to be redone. Then 3 years later, so 5 to 6 years total production, the game became a success. Now, Uncharted 4 is never referenced at any point in the story. However, based on the events and timeline, it's clear the game is Uncharted 4. During Betancourt's time at Naughty Dog, the only series to get a fourth main entry was Uncharted. True. Crash Team Racing was well before his employment. True. So, I mean, yeah, it's Uncharted. There's no doubt with that. And again, we looked at a snippet of this interview on Monday as well. But it's a fascinating little tidbit that changes the dynamic. Now, for me, the general approach that I take with this stuff is just Occam's razor. Okay, like, as far as I can tell, some people are suggesting that this was a grand conspiracy on the part of like Neil to steal the game and to steal the studio away and take control of Naughty Dog and all this. And this was just part of that process and part of that strategy. And so you're implying that he and all of corporate and everybody was saying that this was bad, even though it wasn't. And then he got these people booted out so he could take control. I'm like, okay. Or maybe it was just not very good. Maybe it was the case that the team started to believe their own hype and lost sight of what was like going to connect with fans. Because there's a lot of other people that have also said that there were problems with Uncharted 4 when Neil and Bruce were called in to take over. You know, Sony, I'm sure, would have been just fine if they had been able to just give them the keys to the kingdom and let them go off and work on The Last of Us Part 2 right away. But they needed to salvage Uncharted 4. And so they ended up rebuilding and redoing a lot of stuff. So I'm more inclined to believe that the project probably was just honestly having troubles and they came in to try and overhaul it. I think also, you know, more generally, there's also a broader creative decision on the part of Naughty Dog leadership and Sony, where they were looking at it. And like I said, it was kind of a fork in the road where they could choose to double down on like the campy stylings of the original Uncharted trilogy, which reportedly is what Uncharted 4 originally was going to have, is that it was going to also be pretty campy. The previous Uncharted games featured a lot of like supernatural elements. You notice none of that is at play in Uncharted 4. It's much more, to borrow one of Neil's terms, grounded. You know, and so I think that that is part of the consideration with all this, in addition to the project having troubles, was just that, if we're having trouble getting this across the finish line and we have this new generation of leadership that is knocking it out of the park, let's just have them take over. And Amy, naturally, I don't blame Amy. If I worked on something for years and then I felt as though it wasn't bad, and yet there's these two new guys who just kind of came out of nowhere and had a really successful project blow up, and they're going to come in and they're being given my game taken away from me, and I'm having it I'd be upset too. Who wouldn't be? We'd all be pissed. It's a very reasonable reaction. That's totally reasonable. I feel for Amy, and she went through years of difficulties after Uncharted to get like something out the door. Even right now, she's working on Marvel 1943, and that's been delayed to hell and back as well. So I feel for Amy. She is an OG and she knows what she's doing, and she's a phenomenal game designer, and nobody should doubt that. She's very, very good at what she does. But that doesn't mean that every project that she touched was perfect. And there's plenty of games that are being run by people who know what they're doing that go through development troubles. It's something that happens. Making a game is hard. But I think with this, paired with other reporting we've seen and other rumors and leaks and things from former devs, it makes sense to me that the game was having troubles and that Neil and Bruce were called in to fix it. Bruce decided to leave the studio. It seemed like in all the interviews, they suggested that a lot of it was effectively burnout, creative burnout, or just the crunch just wiped him out. It was a big problem in The Last of Us. And then with Uncharted 4, they crunched for like years straight. And Bruce was like, I can't do this again all the way through The Last of Us Part 2. So Bruce left, and then Neil was pretty much the last man standing at the very, very tip top of Naughty Dog, going into The Last of Us Part 2 and now Intergalactic and everything like that. There's other people like Kurt, for example, who are game designers and directors at Naughty Dog. Sean Eskeg is also one of the game directors over there, and he is reportedly, allegedly, possibly working on Uncharted 5, which will take some form. But I think that it's much less of a conspiracy than the game was having trouble. And so they brought in the two directors that just killed it to fix it and save it. And when they did that, they were given the keys to the kingdom and they took over fully. I think that that's a much easier and simple explanation. Again, going back to Occam's razor, the solution with the least number of variables is usually the correct one. And in this case, I think it's got the least moving parts to just look at it and be like, there's a lot of people saying the project had trouble and problems. And it makes sense if I was Sony or if I was an owner at Naughty Dog and I'm looking at who I should give the keys to the car to. Yeah, it makes sense to give it to the guys that just killed it with The Last of Us and let them fix it. And then naturally, if they save it and fix it, yeah, I'm going to let them do whatever they want and give them, control of the studio. Why wouldn't you? They just hit it out of the park twice in a row. And so I think that that's the more reasonable explanation. I know people love the idea of a big scandalous, like carefully considered ploy to steal the company away. I just don't see that as being realistic. I think it's just much more plainly the game was having troubles. They fixed it. And when they fixed it, they were given the keys to the kingdom because they saved a project that represented a massive investment. So there you go. The problem is after 3 successes, she wasn't even given the chance to co-direct. After 3 wins, there should be some grace. To be clear, there's different philosophies within management with these types of things. I'm understanding your statement as suggesting that she should have been demoted to co-director or to a supporting director or given another project or something. I'm of the mind, as are a lot of other people who have run their own companies and stuff. I don't think you can demote people and it works. I don't think that works. Like it creates an uncomfortable and unhealthy dynamic. There's a weird power shift where things just don't work the way that you would think they should. I don't believe you can demote somebody and have the company function the way it should. For Amy to be the director and then be demoted and placed under Neil and Bruce, having to follow their direction and orders after she was in charge for like a decade, I don't see that working. And so it's pretty common at most companies to just be like, I think maybe we just part ways, maybe we just part ways. And I again, I don't, even if it was her choice and she decided maybe they were willing to give her something else and she's like, no, you just stole this game away from me, I'm leaving. That would be a totally reasonable thing for her to do too. I don't think anybody would give her any guff for that. I think that's a very reasonable reaction. I'd be pissed as well. But I think it's just an unfortunate reality that if you've been in charge of something, it's not working and they need to put somebody else in charge of it, it doesn't work to just be like, well, you just go and sit in the corner and we'll take over, but you still are part of the team, you know? That's sad though. That's business though. I mean, at the end of the day, it's not about preserving feelings. It's about making the game that you just spent millions and millions on function. Because you can, if it's bad for the dynamic of the company and the whole team, what are you going to do? Preserve the feelings of one director whose work wasn't really working out, or save the project, which saves hundreds of jobs? You know, I think people would rather you save the project and everybody's livelihood than some feelings from some people. And I don't think it would even save the feelings either. Like, I think Amy would still justifiably be upset and pissed, you know? My problem is people blaming Neil and Bruce for it when it's almost guaranteed a Sony thing. Well, I'm sure, again, nothing happens in a vacuum. I'm sure that the dynamic was that Bruce and Neil just made The Last of Us. And so when Sony executives are looking at what they should do, they probably went in the office and the studio and asked, like, hey man, off the record, like, what do you think is going on? What do you think that game looks good? Do you think Uncharted 4 is in a good spot? No? Okay. Well, I mean, I'm taking your word with a lot of weight because you know what you're doing. You just made us a crap ton of money and won us a ton of awards. You know, so I think it's just much more reasonable that they probably provided their feedback, and if they honestly thought the game was bad, as other people have also said, it makes sense that Sony would take action and give them the keys. Does that mean that it was solely, you know, Neil's choice? No, it's a process with all of it. Do you think we'll be seeing anything from Intergalactic soon? Yeah, I think sooner than people expect we'll see something with it. But anyway, it's a fascinating story, and again, one that's been debated back and forth. What I don't want to do is do like revisionist history. A lot of people are retroactively trying to say that like Uncharted and The Last of Us 1 were actually really bad games because we didn't like The Last of Us Part 2. And like, I don't want to do that stuff. Like, no, Uncharted 4 was awesome. It was freaking sweet. Last of Us was freaking awesome. It was freaking sweet. And just because you didn't like The Last of Us Part 2 doesn't mean that you have to retcon everything, you know? Two things can be true. You don't have to like The Last of Us Part 2 or Neil's politics or whatever. That's fine. You don't have to rewrite history and pretend like these games that were critically acclaimed and universally praised were actually terrible. You know, that's I think a little silly. It's a little silly. But either way, fascinating story. Again, my feeling is that where there's smoke, there's fire. And when a lot of people are saying that Uncharted 4 was having problems, which is why they had to take over, I'm inclined to believe them, because I think it also makes the most sense. It probably was having troubles. It probably wasn't coming together the way they wanted it to. Sony was unhappy. People on the team were not allowed to provide really critical feedback. And, you know, it just spun and spun until it was clear it wasn't working. And then they put two guys in charge of it to overhaul it and fix it. And clearly it worked because Uncharted 4 is really good. He took my thing.